Hi everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you today about someone who's been really influential in my life personally, and that is Francis Schaeffer. I went to a high school that was named after him, Schaeffer Academy in Rochester, Minnesota. And so I've been very exposed to his work, but this is the first time I've looked at him not in a theological light, but as a historian. And so I will give a brief overview of his life, but I'm mostly going to be focusing on the historiography surrounding Francis Schaeffer. You'll see this divide between theologians or Christian historians who really see him as a valuable asset to modern American thought, but you'll also see historians and presumably non-Christian historians who see him as a detriment and kind of paint him in a foolish light. And so I'm curious to hear what you all think and what you came across in your research. Schaeffer had a non-religious upbringing in Pennsylvania, but was converted in a myth-like fashion after accidentally coming across some Greek history and philosophy books. There he saw that the Greeks raised good questions but had insufficient answers. He went on to study at J. Gresham Machen's seminary in Philadelphia, and later him and his wife Edith started a ministry group in post-war Europe in Switzerland. Thomas Stadler believed that Schaeffer was a great Christian intellectual thinker and great in meaning influential, but he did not think that he was a legitimate historian. He especially challenged Schaeffer's thesis that history and culture had been polluted basically from Renaissance thought. In his books, speeches, and his documentaries, Schaeffer took particular issue with the Renaissance, citing it as the start of humanism and the root of modern-day problems. Different historians have taken issue with his claims. For example, Schaeffer claimed that Leonardo da Vinci was basically an atheist. One historian cited specific works where Leonardo da Vinci wrote things like, "I let be the sacred writings, for they are the supreme truth." Barry Hankins is another historian who is very critical of Francis Schaeffer's historiography. He especially talks about the rhetoric that Francis Schaeffer used, and he cited two really interesting examples. One was when Francis Schaeffer spoke at Wheaton in Illinois, and a colleague came up to him after his speech and said, "Haven't you heard about some people outside of Kierkegaard who are more positive existential philosophers?" And Francis Schaeffer responded with a quote, "Oh yes, but I'm just making a point." And so that kind of showed that Francis Schaeffer was more aware of what he was doing and how he was using rhetoric to convince his audience. A second instance, which is really interesting, is when he debated Mark Knoll, who is the author of our textbook, in 1980. Mark Knoll actually openly criticized Francis Schaeffer, and it was quoted in Newsweek magazine saying that he had little of no idea what scholars actually do. Well, there's a lot of criticism surrounding the historiography of Francis Schaeffer and how he practiced history and used history in his work. All of the sources only had positive things to say about his influence on the Christian community, whether they were Christian sources or not. They talked about how young people had never before really considered that they could have a spiritual life that is also intellectual, and so that was really invigorating for society. And they also talk a lot about how he called Christians to action, to civic engagement in a way that they hadn't been used to before, especially with the startling events of the 1970s and 60s.